Welcome to Soul Lab, a Christian-based podcast utilizing logic, history, science, and scripture to better understand the Christian faith. And now your hosts, Delaney and AJ.
What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of Soul Lab. I am your host, AJ.
And I'm Delaney.
And we are now getting back into part 3 of Is It a Sin to Be Unhealthy? So, if you missed part 1 and part 2, this is part 3. Go back and watch this first. However, we're about to get into it. You ready?
Yeah, let's delve in.
We're going to talk about common misconceptions. Common misconceptions on this idea of is it a sin to be unhealthy? Let's dive into it. And all right, yeah, this is my favorite of the misconceptions. It's the misconception that, because we're talking about is it a sin to be unhealthy? And this is the one I hear the most, is people will say, I can't help it. I was born this way.
I never hear that.
I hear that all the freaking time.
Do you really?
All the time.
I never hear
Almost
that.
every day, someone's, oh, well, I was born with this problem. Like, I'll be at the gym and someone's, oh, well, I was born with bad genetics. I was born with weak whatever.
Okay, two things. One, I was born with bad genetics, and not an excuse. Two.
It's the key.
Yeah. Two, I work with people specifically who are not making excuses, who are trying to fix their problems. I probably don't experience that, what you were saying, because I'm with people who are actively trying to work on their mental health.
Sure.
Or their health in general.
I think that's awesome. I think the average person
Probably.
that I talk to,
That's what I'm saying.
they do this. They make up excuses and they say, I can't help it, bad genetics, bad situation, whatever.
This is a tiny rabbit hole. We won't go very far down it.
Go for
But
it.
something that AJ and I've noticed in our relationship is that we work in very different fields. And we also, I feel like, I was in college for 8 years. And you were like, I'm going to go be a professional right out of
I
high
dropped
school.
out.
Yeah. I was saying it eloquently, but yes, you dropped out. And so we have very different, not only careers, but like early 20s lifestyles and experiences. And we have very different views of certain things in the world. And I think that's because of that, because we have.
Probably.
And so like, I don't experience people saying, oh, I was born like that. You do experience that. And so you have that different experience.
Oh, it's a huge pet peeve of mine.
Yeah.
I hear it all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. People ask me for advice on different areas, be it like fitness, finances, whatever. And I'll be giving them some advice and they're like, oh, well, I was born with this problem. Well, I don't have access to that, or excuses. I hate excuses. That's my biggest pet peeve.
Yeah.
Hate them.
I know.
But this is a common misconception is people think, oh, I can't take care of my health, be it physical, mental, spiritual, because I was born with this issue or I inherited this issue or whatever. I think for the vast majority of people, this is an excuse for people to neglect their health.
Correct.
Yeah. And it's them just eliminating personal accountability for the subject.
One time I was at First Watch, and this veteran gets out of her car, and I can't remember if she was missing one leg or two, but she was missing a leg, and she was ripped. Like, she was ripped. She had a service dog with her. And I was like, that is dedication. Like, I don't care if I don't have a leg, I'm going to be ripped. And she was ripped. Yeah.
And okay, so just to reference David Goggins again. For those that have read Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. Goggins.
Oh, I did say that she was missing a leg?
You said missing a leg.
Okay, good. I was going to make sure I didn't say a veteran. She was missing a leg, yeah.
So just to reference David Goggins again.
Okay.
If you read through his book, Can't Hurt Me, you find out at the end. So first off, the whole book is about him achieving these pretty incredible things. You get to the end of the book where he waits to announce that after he achieved these things, he went and got a checkup, found out he had a serious, I think it was a heart murmur, but he had a serious heart defect, which technically should have made it impossible for him to do things he did, but he did it anyway. I use that as an example. I think in life, you either make excuses or you make progress. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
I have a ton to talk about. You go ahead.
There was this guy, and I heard it third hand, so I'll try to find it so you can cite it. But there's this guy who became like he was in the service, the military service, and I can't remember what branch, but it was like one of the first to become this like super, I think Navy SEAL, maybe something like that. And he got kicked out halfway through because he had a heart issue, and or something with his organs, and he had it fixed and came back, and his like person in charge, whatever they're called, I don't know in the military is watching this. They were like, "Why are you here? You shouldn't be here." But he went back. I think he had like 3 times. Over and over again, when they kicked him out, he was like, I'll get it fixed, and came back and tried again. Just determination. Yeah. Yeah,
it's the idea that our circumstances may shape us, but they don't define us.
Yeah. I say that all the time. Yeah. I'm like, that
That's
made
probably
you
where I got
who
it
you
from.
are. Probably not. I'm like, that made you who you are. and that is huge, it doesn't mean that's where you stay. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's an active choice to say, maybe, yes, I was born with the struggle. However, here's what I'm doing about it.
Right.
So, and it could be genetics, upbringing, circumstances. There's many things that people could use that excuse of I can't help it, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Still,
Yeah.
I think that we do have control.
My favorite example of someone overcoming their physical circumstances is Violet Swaringo in Fourth Wing.
You know, that's not a real person.
I know, but
Okay.
if you, it's just like, there's so many people who did things like that.
Yeah.
And so it's just the certain things she says or things people say to her. I think the author has the same disorder that the character has in the book. I think it's just so much, oh, I actually can do this. I have to make some small adaptations, some alterations, but I can still do it. Yeah.
So, yeah, it's like you either make excuses or you make progress.
Yes.
You can't do both.
Yeah.
So just a Bible verse I really love, and this is another one that's usually taken out of context, but is actually very applicable to this conversation, is Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength, because that specific verse, which we talked about how it's misunderstood in our previous episode, but Paul is literally going through a rough time and for those that don't know, Paul went through more trials and tribulation than anyone else, I think, referenced in the New Testament. He had every reason to make excuses of why he couldn't accomplish something. But instead, he doesn't say that. He says, even though, Lord, I'm going through all this, I know I can do all things through you because you give me strength. And he's currently going through a lot of stuff, and he's like, I'm going to push through anyways. And I love that verse. I think it's really impactful to recognize, like, yeah, we might all have our different struggles or battles, but we can overcome it through Christ who gives us strength.
One of my favorite songs is Though You Slay Me. Have you heard that song? I don't know if it's based on the verse when it was written, but it like correlates very well with the verse about even though like you slay me, even if you are the one who's punishing, meaning God, putting me through trials, I will still serve you. And it's just an incredible, like, I don't know why I'm going through this, but I know that there's a greater purpose. You know what I'm saying?
I love that.
Yeah, I think we're
absolutely.
But yeah.
No, I love it. And here, going back to what we were talking about earlier about God judges not the physical but the heart.
Yeah.
Even if you are working hard towards improving some sort of health, right? Let's say there is a very rare condition, and I don't remember what it's called, where somebody is born with a condition where they incredibly struggle with controlling their body fat, that their body naturally just acquires more fat. And so they usually are overweight because of this. Even if you're putting in effort to diet and exercise regularly to try and control that, and you still are overweight, that effort has value because God judges the heart, right? We're all given different battles and God judges the heart. So it's even if I do think there is something to genuinely giving 100% effort to something, even if it's not, you don't feel like it's helping. I think that effort still has value. I feel very convicted of that. And I feel convicted of that. And that actually gives me peace knowing if I'm giving as much effort as I can towards something, worst case, God sees that and knows that I'm genuinely trying and putting effort towards it because God judges my heart in the matter. And I think that's why God is referenced as the ultimate just judge, because only God can judge that. No one else is going to know if I genuinely gave effort or not, because I can look like I did and not. I can look like I'm not and could. Only God genuinely knows.
Yeah.
But I just want to emphasize for maybe someone who's struggling with something, but they're trying, don't give up, because I think that has an incredible amount of value.
I agree.
And next, I want to emphasize, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but how God works through weaknesses, right? How God uses that to glorify himself, to use us as tools. 2 Corinthians 12:9 says, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Weakness, be it physical, genetic, whatever, is not an excuse for neglect, but an opportunity to rely on God and glorify him through your perseverance, right? I do think that we glorify God through the action of persevering through this obstacle, through this thing that we're battling.
I mean, look at the lineage of Jesus Christ himself. There's so many people in his lineage who were thought to be the underdogs, who were thought to be lesser.
Sorry, I said some pop in my head.
Quote, lesser than, unquote. And so there's so much, and they're like, nah, sorry, like I'm the ancestral line of Jesus Christ himself. Like it's just incredible how much God's actually, no, you give 100% effort, I'm going to reward that.
Yeah. If you look at anyone in the line of Abraham to Jesus, most of them had something they had to overcome, like that's referenced specifically in scripture. So yeah, just Moses as an example, overcoming his speech impediment. God's asking him to lead the Israelites. A leader needs to be able to speak, you would think, right? Speak well, eloquently. He has a speech impediment. He overcomes it.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but he perseveres even though, but I just think that's a good example of how, like we can glorify God through the trial,
Yeah.
through the thing that we were given to battle. But I think you had one.
The very thing that you think that you can't do because of your challenges, the very thing that he can make happen. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It made sense.
Well, what a cool, but like what a cool moment for you to have a battle.
I can't speak it, friend. Actually, you can. You're going to.
Yeah.
And lead an entire army.
Right.
Entire people.
Yeah.
I was thinking of not as strong a statement, but Rahab is who I was thinking of, who is just an unlikely person that God would choose, and he did. And she's in the ancestral line to Jesus. And same with Esther.
So I'll tell you some reasons why this is the one I was excited to talk about, this misconception, is because of how important it is. Because I think that it is I can't emphasize this enough. I think it's incredibly harmful to someone's spiritual walk to use this excuse, to have this mindset, right? I can't help it. Okay. I think that it is incredibly harmful to someone's spiritual walk. I think that it leads to resignation, meaning it creates like this attitude of lack of accountability, which stunts someone's growth. It stunts someone's capability. It neglects your stewardship. So you're like not taking ownership of the fact. It creates this lack of stewardship where you don't take care of this thing that God gave you, your body, your physical, mental, and emotional health. It kind of belittles God because you're saying like, okay, I was born with this problem. There's nothing to be done about it. It's like undermining God's power and God's authority. And it overlooks like the power that God has. I think for me, my biggest fear is I try so freaking hard to never say I can't help it, because I have this huge fear. The moment I say that, I've resigned myself to it. If I say, I can't help this problem because I was born with this, I'm now just accepting the fact there's nothing I can do about it. And I think that immediately limits me, and that terrifies me personally.
I think it's I don't know if twofold is the right word. I think that there's more to be said about it. I think that I can't help it. I think that sentence is fine as long as it's at the end of the sentence. Does that make sense? So I can't help it, so I will. Does that make sense? I can't, like someone who deals with chronic pain, okay? I can't help that I'm in pain, so I will do what?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Sense? You're saying like don't let that be the end of the sentence.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
So okay. Because sometimes people truly can't, like chronic pain, like arthritis. Like, sorry, I have arthritis. There are things you can do though. Yes. Hydrate. You're still gonna be in pain. I'm not saying it's gonna go away, but so I will this, that, and the other. So I will help other people with chronic pain. Yes. So I will. I know a therapist who is becoming a therapist because she has chronic pain, and I'm gonna help people with chronic pain. Does that make sense? She's not saying I can't help it. End of the sentence. I can't help it, so I'll help. Does that make sense?
Yeah, don't place a period there, place a comma.
Yeah, that's another thing that Mark Batterson talks about in Circle Maker. Yeah.
No, I agree with that. It's the idea that it's like, you can say, well, I can't help this battle, but I can help this, or I can use it this way, or I can still try and do X, Y, Z to overcome it. Yeah, I agree with that.
So I think the sentence is okay as long as it's at the end of the sentence. Yeah.
So for all the people that are listening right now that are like, well, AJ, Delaney, you don't know my personal story. You don't know what I'm going through. You don't know, you're wrong about that. Some people just can't help it. I'm just going to share some statistics because I thought this was kind of cool. Because when I was researching, I came across all this. The CDC states that, Center for Disease Control, which does a lot of reputable studies, states that 80% of heart disease, stroke, and type 2 diabetes, and up to 40% of cancers could have been prevented with a healthier lifestyle. And they define that as proper diet, regular exercise, avoiding tobacco use. 80% of heart disease, stroke, and type 2 diabetes, 80% is a lot. 40% of cancer, so almost half of people that are battling cancer, could have been prevented. Proper diet, regular exercise, avoiding tobacco use. That's a lot, okay? So here's another study. A survey from the National Health and Nutrition Examination found that Americans average 5.4 hours of leisure time daily. But most people report lack of time as their main reason for not exercising or taking care of their health.
So accurate.
So the first study I was referencing to prove that, okay, I think a majority of people don't realize how much taking care of yourself physically impacts your longevity and whatnot, because it really does impact it. The second study I'm referencing, because a common argument I hear, people like, oh, I don't have time. I don't have time to do this. I don't have time to do that. Well, I think statistically you probably do, but I think that's true. I think most Americans waste time without even realizing it, or they're inefficient. I think you have more time than you realize. So here's the next one. People will say, yeah, but I have bad genetics. All right. CDC also did a study that found that only 20% of longevity, right? Your healthiness, your life, how long you're going to live, longevity, only 20% is affected by your genetics. 80% is influenced by your lifestyle. Okay. So it's, yeah, genetics. Does that impact your longevity? Does that impact your physical state? Sure. But 80% of that is controllable, where it is your lifestyle based. Okay. Could you be born a certain way? Sure. But 80% means I can outweigh that. It's if you take two people and they're the exact same everything and they have the exact same genetics and they do the exact same things, but then one of them, all he does is change, or he or she, all they do is they change their lifestyle, right? They're having an 80%
Okay, I see what you're
impact.
saying. I was confuzzled. I was like, huh, okay.
They're going to have this massive impact. Okay. It's like, yeah, 20%. Yeah. I don't know how else to explain that.
You're good.
Your longevity is impacted 80% by your lifestyle. All right. Here's just a little tip. I just thought this was cool. A study published by the Journal of Obesity showed that people who track their diet and track their exercise lose 2 to 3 times more weight than those who don't. So taking ownership and tracking and putting effort behind things leads to better results. So that's more of just like a little tip. I think it's important. And lastly, another reason why I think it is so important to not have this negative mindset of saying, well, I can't control this or whatever. A study by Frontiers in Psychology found that negative beliefs, negative affirmations, so saying to yourself these things like, I don't have control, I can't do this.
I was talking about this today. Go on.
Yeah. I'm not strong enough, I have bad genetics, whatever. Those who reframe their mindset from negative to positive and give themselves positive affirmations were 2 to 5 times more likely to succeed in their health goals.
I am so into this because people don't realize that when you talk to yourself, your brain is registering it to a point as if someone else is saying it to you. So would you bully someone else like that? No, you want them to feel like that, but you're bullying yourself. What?
Yes.
You wouldn't let someone else say that to you, but you'll say it to yourself?
It makes an impact. To the
Makes
point
no
where you and
sense.
I actually do this thing. We do this thing. And it's kind of annoying, but I think like when we do it, but then later I'm like, okay, no, that was good. Where if one of us says something negative about ourselves, the other person calls it out. So if like if I say to myself, I do something silly, I'm like, I'm such an idiot, I can't believe I did that. She's like, hey, you're not an idiot, don't say that.
Because you'll start to believe it.
Because you'll start to
And
believe
you'll think
it.
it's, oh, no, I'm not. Or you see a lot of people like see themselves like, oh, I look so ugly this morning. No, you don't. No.
And when you first did that to me at first, I was like, ugh. And now I'm like, no, that's really important actually.
Yeah.
That she does that for me.
The first few times he got mad at me, he's what I am.
Yeah. All right, cool. So that is the 3 misconceptions, the last one being the one that I'm most passionate about. Anything else you want to add to that?
No, I think that was great.
All right, cool. On to the next topic. We have practical applications. So we have talked about so far in our different parts of these episodes of the series. We've talked about why biblically and logically we believe it's a sin. We've talked about the misconceptions on it, but now more importantly, how do we even impact or control it? How do we change it? How do we refrain from this sin? So practical applications. I'm going to talk about the first application, steps to honor God with your health. Like how do we honor God using our health? Okay. Which requires intentional, constant actions that align with the biblical stewardship of our bodies. All right. Steps. So step number 1 on how to take better care of our health. Start small, just like any other goal. Okay. Start small. Focus on manageable changes. Okay. Such as if you know your physical health needs work, just start with walking. Start with something small. Start with something to take care of it.
It's funny you say that because that's also the first homework I give to people with their mental health.
Is to start with a walk?
Go for it. Yeah. Not always. Sometimes I'm just like, dude, go for a walk.
Yep. And so, yeah, just start with like 10-minute walk. If you're trying to drink more water, start with just like having a few glasses, switching out some sodas for water in between meals or during your meals. You're trying to work on a more positive mindset when you start praying at meals, and start off when you pray with being grateful. Okay. Just little things, start small. What?
Say that part again.
So if you're trying, let's say you think an area of opportunity for you is maybe not your physical health, but maybe it's like your mental health.
Oh, mental.
Yeah, maybe it's your mental health.
Well,
a great way to improve your mental health is through Thanksgiving, is through being thankful.
No, but getting to the thankful mindset goes just beyond just saying I'm thankful. There's more to it. I would say start small by like with the mental by having a few minutes of quiet every day.
Yes,
I would
there you go.
2 minutes of quiet.
I love that.
Yeah.
Making time for quiet time to almost like meditate, relax, recover.
Yeah.
I like it. So there's actually scripture on this. So we got Zechariah 4:10, which is all about, Zechariah 4 is about large, impactful things that have happened. And this verse specifically talks about how do not despise small beginnings. the idea that, yes, great things tend to start small. So I say that all to say, start small, start with something. Something's better than nothing. Next pro tip, prioritize nutrition. Okay. So avoid excessive processed foods, high sugar foods. I'm talking specifically about like physical health, which then ties into mental and spiritual. 1 Corinthians 10:31 says, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it, all for the glory of God. So prioritizing your nutrition, I think, has a huge impact on your physical state. I think we know that logically.
Mental.
Which then impacts your mental and spiritual.
Oh, no.
Incorporate physical activity. So engaging in regular exercise, finding whatever works for your schedule, for your routine. Okay. I'll tell you that I was reading this really awesome study one time on this subject, actually, where they took a few hundred participants and asked them to adhere to a workout schedule. And what they found was those that said they did it three ways. I think maybe I've told you this before, but they did it 3 ways. There were 3 groups. One group simply was told, hey, you need to exercise regularly. Here's your plan. Go do it. And there they said, I will do it. Cool. The second group put it on like a checklist. Okay, I'm going to make sure I work out and I'll check it off when I'm done. The third group actually put it on their calendar with a specific date and time when they were going to do it. The first group, I don't remember the exact statistics, but it was like the first group only completed it 10% of the time. The second group that actually put on a to-do list completed it 40% of the time. But the group that actually put it on their calendar and said, I'm going to do this at this specific date and time, completed it, I think it was 85% of the time, either 80 or 90%. But the point I'm trying to get across, statistically, you're more likely to accomplish something if it's on your calendar. If you say, I'm going to do this at this specific day and time, so physical activity, start with putting it on your calendar, and I think you'll make a huge impact. And then just to tie into the physical, making time for rest. So practice rest, commit to regular sleep patterns. I think a great way to take care of yourself physically and emotionally and spiritually is making rest a non-negotiable, making sure you go to sleep at the same time. I mean, there's like 100 things we could talk about on the subject, but going to sleep at the same time every night, making sure you wind down and at 1 to 2 hours before bed, not being on technology an hour before bed, just like routine, getting into a regular routine helps your sleep, which helps your physical, which helps your mental and your spiritual. Another pro tip, monitor your health. So just knowing exactly where you're at physically and mentally at all times, like understanding where your weaknesses are, knowing what you're working on, monitor where you are, prioritizing any concerns that you may have. If you know that there's something not making sense with your body, go and get checked up. Don't neglect getting proper care when needed, but also don't neglect getting proper support, right? Be that like a dietitian or a physical trainer or whatever it is you feel like you may need to work on these areas. And then lastly, on the idea of like physical, mostly focusing on physical health, set goals. Have clear goals on what you're trying to achieve. SMART goals. You remember what the SMART stands for?
Yes.
So glad you brought this up, by the way. I literally just sent an email to all my leaders.
Now I have to go through it.
Yes.
So
No, wake up.
Okay. SMART goals. So SMART goals. S means it's specific.
Okay.
M means it's measurable.
Mm-hmm.
A is attainable.
Mm-hmm.
R is relevant. And T is time bound.
Yes, yeah. That's right. Yeah, SMART goals. It's just so funny because I literally just went over this with my whole leadership team.
I teach it
this week
in classes.
I love it.
Yeah.
SMART goals.
SMART goals.
Yeah, write them down. Statistically, goals that I wrote down have a much higher likelihood of coming to fruition. All right, cool. So yeah, the first part of practical application was like steps to honor God with your health, how to like take care of your physical health. The next pro tip is all about community. You want to improve something? Surround yourself with people that care about you improving it. Community support encourages consistency, provides accountability, which I think is the most important thing, and health-related goals. And so I think what's really critical, we talked about this earlier, but having a faith-based, not necessarily, it doesn't have to be like every person, but having a faith-based friend group that supports your goals, that goes a long way. To be surrounded by like-minded people that want to support you getting better in these areas. And that could be in the form of like your friend group, your small group, church, whatever, prayer groups and Bible studies, whatever. But just having people that you're surrounded with that are like-minded, that want to encourage you in these ways. And great verse, Ecclesiastes 4:9-10, Two are better than one. If either of them falls, one can help the other up. And then the other verse is iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. All great verses on accountability. You can do things like share your health goals with each other, share your ambitions. Research shows that people are 95% more likely to achieve their goals with an accountability partner, which I think is huge. 95%, like just by having an accountability partner on a subject drastically increases your odds of succeeding. I would make the argument if you don't have an accountability partner on something you're struggling with, you're not actually trying.
I disagree. Because
Go for
there
it.
have been things where I could not find an accountability partner because the thing I like who's going for the same goal, the thing I was going for was not very common. And so really I don't think that's fair to say. I would say if you haven't looked for one, maybe, but just to say if you don't have one isn't very fair because sometimes it's just not to be had.
On the goal you have, does someone have to specifically be going for that goal for them to be your accountability partner?
In that specific area, I had trouble finding someone, yes.
But my question is, does somebody have to specifically be going for that goal that you have for them to be your accountability partner?
No, not necessarily.
So
for that specific goal, it was hard to find someone. My point is that just because you can't find someone doesn't mean that you're not actually trying. Yeah. Sometimes find the people, and sometimes we're just not surrounded with people. There's some lonely birds out there. And so I would say if you haven't looked for one, you're not trying.
I'm going to raise this is where Delaney and I are going to disagree, which is fine. I firmly believe if you say I struggle with XYZ, I could be wrong, but this is AJ's belief. This is just AJ's opinion. I believe if you say, hey, I struggle with XYZ, but you haven't actually sought out an accountability partner, then I don't think you're actually trying.
That's what I just said. Seek out an but it doesn't mean you're going to find it. You know what I'm saying? I just said that you have to look for one.
Yes, but I think I hear what you're saying, but I think a lot of people use that as a cop-out.
I agree.
And they're like, I tried, but I couldn't find anyone. I'm like, I disagree.
We talked about the dangers of cop-outs, so you can't use a cop-out. But cop-outs aside, sometimes there's some lonely birds out there just can't be found. Yeah. But seeking is a huge part of it.
See, I think that you can always find someone. And it's okay we disagree on that.
I think sometimes it's okay. Yeah, I think sometimes people can't, and you probably haven't had an experience where you couldn't find one that's fantastic. Yes.
I think no matter what, there's always a way to get an accountability partner for every subject. And I would love for someone in the comments to tell me why that's not true. But I see so many people that, and I think when I say so many people, I mean like most human beings, myself included, struggle with this, where we have a battle we know we need to overcome. We have something that we know we need to either stop doing or start doing whatever, but we don't tell anyone. It never changes. If we had an accountability partner, it would. And there's so many studies pointing to that to be true.
Oh, I agree with that.
And I think that it's an easy cop-out to say, well, someone wouldn't understand what I'm going through, or I'm just not comfortable,
we're talking about apples and oranges.
Or I couldn't find anyone.
We're talking about apples and oranges.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm saying if you truly couldn't find anyone, there was none to be found, because there's some lonely birds out there.
Yeah.
But the apples and oranges are
to my point, I think that's 1 in a million.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Well, yeah.
I think most people
1
in
in 100,000 maybe.
Yeah, 1 in 5 million probably. All right, cool. Another pro tip is trust God's grace, remember God's grace. Okay. We're not supposed to strive for perfection. We're supposed to strive. I think, like we talked about earlier, there's value in the attempt of genuinely trying to change our situations that are battles and trying to overcome the battles that cause us to sin. And just having trust in God's grace, that as long as the attempt is there, that does have value. Just trusting that this journey of taking care of our health ultimately is in God's hands, that we're just called to do the best we can with it. And ultimately we got to give it to God, and not. Proverbs 3:5-6 talks about trust in the Lord with all of your heart, lean not on your own understanding, but try to avoid it perfectionism. Okay. Like, we're not trying, your goal isn't to be perfect. Your goal is to love God, love others, glorify God, and taking care of your health allows you to do that. Remember that salvation is through grace, not through works. We talk about this in another episode. But I think spending a lot of time in prayer, praying for wisdom, praying for guidance, praying for discernment of how, to overcome these different health battles, I think has a lot of value. And just to reference James, if any of you likes wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault. And on the subject of not just having grace for yourself, but for others, which is where I struggle with, because I'm a very whatever, there's always a way to figure it out. There's always a way to make an impact, but giving grace to others where maybe they're struggling, and just recognize everyone has their own journey that they have to go through, I think is really important to remember. So to summarize, key takeaways: honor God by prioritizing your health. lean on community for support, but trust God's grace through the process. It's the main things that I'm trying to get across. So anything on that?
I think that's good.
Yeah. All right. We're in the last section, the conclusion and the challenge. All right. Cool. I really like my coat. Conclusion. All right. To summarize the parts of everything we've discussed so far from this series, okay? So just the key points we're trying to get across. Let's just go over first everything that we talked about so far. So we talked about the idea of, is it a sin to be unhealthy? We defined what that is, how that's more than just physical, it's mental and emotional. Went through some biblical references and perspectives on that, practical and logical reasons of why they would be a sin on top of the biblical, common misconceptions, and then practical applications of how we can improve those areas. And then just some of the main key points to get across: physical health, mental health, emotional health are all interconnected, leading towards an impact on your faith, on your spiritual life. And that stewardship of the body, mind, and spirit are all part of honoring God. Like, this is a part of a method of honoring God. It's good stewardship is. We talk about a lot about it's important to avoid extremes either way through neglect or making it an idol. That's really important to remember. We should strive for balance. We talked about the practical steps: start small, make intentional changes, and over time that'll lead to significant improvement and glorifying God. Staying committed to the process. We talked a lot about best bets there. And just remembering to encourage grace over guilt. Just a reminder that this is one of the perversions where the devil wins, is where we take sins and they get to the point where we're like guilty or we hate ourselves over them. We feel negative towards ourselves. And that's not the intent. The intent is to, yes, the Holy Spirit will convict us with negative feelings and emotions, but we don't need to be consumed by that. Does that make sense? Yeah. So emphasizing grace over guilt. And I want to just real quick go over some book recommendations. These are some books that I personally have read that I'm personally recommending. These are some that I've either heard about or researched that are on my list. But I want to start with like book recommendations, and I'm going to put all these in the show notes. Book recommendations on physical health in relation to spiritual health. The first one is called The Daniel Plan, 40 Days to a Healthier Life by Rick Warren and Dr. Daniel. And it focuses on 5 essential areas for taking care of one's health: faith, food, fitness, focus, and friends. And then gives practical tips for living a healthier lifestyle, but all using biblical principles to explain. It almost goes in more depth, I would say, than this podcast. And so if you're curious on more information on this topic, I would do that book. Another great one, Everybody Matters, which explores the spiritual significance of taking care of your physical health. And it does a lot of good challenges in there and offers like a balanced perspective on how to take care of your health biblically. Some books on the mental/emotional health side. So first one's called Switch on Your Brain: The Key to Peak Happiness by Dr. Caroline Leaf, which and I haven't read this one, I've just heard about it, which explores the connection between your thoughts, your emotions, your physical health, kind of like we were talking about earlier, like how they're all intertwined. Next one is called Get Out of Your Head: Stopping the Spiral of Toxic Thoughts. So Delaney talked about this, I think it'll be the last episode. So Delaney actually talked about this, and I think it was part 1. She talks about how it's like we can get in this negative spiral of like how one thing leads to another. So you had said how like not taking care of your physical health leads to emotional problems, leads to mental, but that leads to more physical. And it's like this negative spiral. So the book goes into depth on that. And then some devotionals and journals on the subject. So for people that are like, hey, I don't really want to read devotional or a journal, also a good idea. First one's called Wellness God's Way: A Journey to Wellness Through the Word. That's a devotional, combines scripture with like physical health tips. Next one's called Faith and Fitness Development: 21 Days to Reclaim Your Health and Spirit. Another great devotional. And then just 2 other books that I read that I think are good books on the subject. If you're wanting specifically you need help at improving your physical health, there's a great book called The 4-Hour Body by Tim Ferriss, also the author of The 4-Hour Workweek. But this book talks about the most efficient ways to take care of your health. And so it's less on the biblical side, but it's just some great tips on taking care of your physical health. And then everything we talked about today has to do with habits, right? Everything we're talking about has to do with habits. Awesome book on that, Atomic Habits by James Clear. Phenomenal book that just talks about like great tips to implement changes in your life. It's helped me a ton in my life with changing some habits, implementing new ones. And it kind of explains like there's a lot of science to habits that it goes over, which I like. So those are just some reads that I recommend. So just to wrap this up, the final thing I want to end on is a challenge to our listeners, to our watchers. Challenge number 1, reflect and evaluate. So take time, actually sit down intentionally, take time to think about your physical health, your mental health, and your emotional health. Take time to reflect and evaluate, where is my opportunity? Okay. Pray about it. And then when you identify, okay, yes, I feel like this is an area I need to work on, especially if you were triggered by something we said in this in one of our episodes on this subject, take action. Make a tangible goal that you're going to work towards to improve this area, even if it's something small. Like we said, start small was a great tip. So reflect and evaluate, take action. Here's the next part of that challenge. Involve others. 95%, right? We talked about that earlier. 95% of people who have a accountability partner succeed in their goal. Involve other people, have a friend, family member, whatever, who can guide you, who can help you with overcoming, who can help you with obtaining that goal. And then lastly, on the challenge, after that, still continue to pray, continue to ask God for help and seek wisdom. We talked about this in another, maybe earlier in another part, but Proverbs 3:5-6, trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding, in all of your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. So yeah, that's the challenge. Reflect, take action, involve others, continue to pray about it. So do it. All right. Anything else on that subject?
I think that's it.
Yeah. So just to wrap this whole topic, this whole series, that your health isn't just about you. We are called to be great stewards of all that God gives us. So your health is not just about you, and that we are called to take great care of it, that it is a lack of stewardship if we don't. We need to take ownership of that. And we need to use that as stewardship to glorify God. All right, cool.
All right.
And that's all I had.
Thank you so much for watching Soul Lab. We've been your hosts, Delaney.
And AJ.
And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Soul Lab with AJ and Delaney. You can find all materials referenced from today's episodes in the show notes. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, comment, and subscribe. Check out our website for more episodes and stay tuned for the next release. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.